Imagine a convoy of vehicles, not tanks or troop carriers, but brightly painted buses, old ambulances, and battered vans. They're winding through the English countryside, heading for a field. Inside are families, idealists, free spirits, a community known as New Age travelers. And on a sunny afternoon in June 1985, the British government decided to stop them. Not with a polite request, but with a military-style operation that would become known as the Battle of the Beanfield. I'm Abnul J. Farabi, and this is Flashpoints, the wars that shaped us. To understand this clash, you have to understand the travelers. In the 1980s, under Margaret Thatcher's Britain of privatization and sharp social division, a counterculture flourished. These weren't just hippies. They were a mobile protest against a system they saw as cold and materialistic. They followed free festivals, lived self-sufficiently on the road, and were seen by authorities as a literal roadblock to the established order. Their intended destination that June was Stonehenge for the annual Summer Solstice festival, a tradition that had been happening for years, but which the government, citing damage to the ancient site, was now determined to crush. The convoy was intercepted long before it reached the stones. Police set up roadblocks, corralling the 140 vehicles into a nearby Beanfield. What happened next was a shocking escalation. For hours, a tense standoff held. Then, as evening approached, the police line moved in. They weren't just arresting people. They were smashing the travelers' world to pieces. Officers in riot gear, some without identifying numbers, swung truncheons. Windscreens were shattered, windows smashed. Pregnant women were dragged from vehicles. Personal belongings, homes, everything was strewn across the trampled beans. One reporter on the scene said it was like a cross between the storming of the Winter Palace and a nuclear attack. 140 vehicles were impounded. Over 500 people were arrested, the largest mass arrest of civilians since World War II. But here's the critical flashpoint. Not a single traveler was ever convicted of any crime related to that day. The courts later ruled the police action unlawful, an admission of a state power wildly overreaching its bounds. The Battle of the Beanfield wasn't a riot, it was a rout. A deliberate, violent message sent to an entire subculture. Your way of life is not permitted. The legacy of the Beanfield is a fracture line in British society. It marked the end of the traditional free festival movement and accelerated the Criminal Justice Act of 1994, which effectively criminalized the traveler lifestyle. It was a defining moment in the politicization of alternative culture, proving that the state could and would use overwhelming force to enforce conformity. But it also cemented a mythology of resistance. For many, the travelers became symbols of a struggle against an increasingly authoritarian and homogenized vision of Britain. It makes me think about the lines we draw between order and freedom. Coming from Bangladesh, a place with its own deep complexities of community and displacement, and now living in New York, a city of constant motion, I see this not as a quaint British oddity, but a universal tension. When does a society's need for control override the rights of a minority to simply exist differently? The Beanfield is a stark, ugly answer to that question. It wasn't a war over territory, but over identity. A war declared on a dream of freedom that was, quite literally, parked in a field. The stones of Stonehenge have stood for millennia, witnessing countless comings and goings. On that solstice, they witnessed a quiet field. The convoy never arrived. The battle ensured the stones were safe, perhaps, from trivial damage. But at what cost to the spirit they were meant to celebrate? For Flashpoints, I'm Abnul J. Farabi. This episode was produced by Light Knot Studios. Find more of our stories at https://www.lightknotstudios.com.